BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. In this episode, I will be talking about the book The Allen Files by John Bowman, of course discussing the prime suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery, looking at some parallels between the Zodiac Killer and the 3X Killer of the 1930s, and of course responding to your questions and comments about the Zodiac Killer. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, and welcome to the show. Now, the first thing that I have for you guys comes to us from Vincent McConnell, who sent this over to the Facebook page. Anybody can write me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there's also BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, which is very helpful if you want to send larger things. And we have an open letter to Ned DeHaan from Vincent McConnell. And Vincent actually has a couple of different things that are discussed here, but it says, Dear Black Box Online Radio, attention, Ned DeHaan. And there are actually two things that have been written by Vincent. One of them is going to be talking about the murder of Paul Stine. Paul Stine was the final Zodiac Killer victim who was murdered on October 11th of 1969, and I'm just going to read this post here. And furthermore, why did the Zodiac Killer feel such an intense need to prove that he killed Paul Stine that he included actual forensic evidence from a crime scene in a letter? And he's of course talking about how, with the Zodiac Killer's final victim, he cut off a piece of his bloody shirt, cut it into multiple segments, and mailed them in with multiple Zodiac letters. Before the post-Stine letters, the Zodiac Killer proved his claims by offering confidential and sensitive details not known to the press and the public, but all of a sudden, after the shooting of Paul Stine, the Zodiac Killer starts including forensic evidence in his letter, indisputably authenticating them more powerfully than ever before, saying, Dear Editor, I am the murderer of the taxi cab driver last night over by Washington Street and Maple Street. To prove this, here is a blood-stained piece of his shirt. Capitalization and punctuation ignored. Why was the author so desperate to prove that he shot the cab driver as to risk sending forensic evidence with the letter? This would click very nicely into place if Arthur Lee Allen did it. Indeed, approached Ralph Spinelli before the murder, telling him, I'm Zodiac and I will kill a cab driver in the city. An interesting note is that Spinelli quotes Arthur Lee Allen as having said, I'm Zodiac, not I'm the Zodiac, as almost everyone in the entire world would say. Allen was known frequently for using this variant. In fact, he also included it on the label of a VHS tape sent to Phyllis Seawater. You know this goes deeper. Oh, you know the deeper this goes, the more it starts to feel like all Zodiac was doing was a quiet public job application. How are you supposed to get hired as a hitman if you don't have any criminal convictions? If nobody has confidence in your willingness to kill in cold blood, perhaps initiate a public killing spree so brazen and evil that it showcases your ability to shoot innocent kids. Maybe this is why Zodiac stopped announcing his attacks, as he claims. Maybe he got hired as a hitman. I'm Arthur Lee Allen all the way to the bank now. Subjective opinion, confirmation bias warning. It's been right in front of our faces for so long. Now, I said that there were two things from Vincent, but this is one that I want to respond to first, because there are challenge questions here, and you guys know that I can't resist those. Why did the Zodiac Killer feel such an intense need to prove that he killed Paul Stine that he included actual forensic evidence from a crime scene in a letter? After the first set of letters are mailed out, really, the Zodiac is trying to convince people that he committed the Lake Herman Road murders and the Blue Rock Springs shooting by providing facts that only he and the police knows. Then he commits a crime, the Lake Berryessa stabbing, wearing a hooded costume, writing a message on the car door, leaving a signature behind. And then, after the Stine murder, he cuts off a piece of Paul Stine's shirt and mails that in with multiple letters. Why the changes? Why the escalation in criminal behavior? Why the escalation in the need to prove that he committed these crimes? Well, you guys know that I'm a big believer in the Zodiac-Ripper connection, that the Zodiac was using Jack the Ripper as a playbook, and Jack the Ripper mailed in half a kidney of one of the victims, allegedly, and I think the Zodiac took inspiration from that. But there is a more widely discussed theory out there, and that is that the Zodiac might not have done the Lake Berryessa stabbing. that he was a criminal who committed his murders by gun, and then then whoever committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing learned about the Zodiac name from the newspaper, and then decided to make a costume, put the Zodiac symbol on it, and then approach Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard and commit the crimes by knife, first tying up the victims and then stabbing them as opposed to shooting them, and that was a copycat. So the real Zodiac killer is thinking, all right, now I have to do something that is going to prove without any doubt that I am the real killer, and that's what it ultimately was, cutting off a piece of the shirt and mailing it in. That's a possibility, and I used to think very highly of that possibility in the past, or at the very least that there were multiple killers. You can go back and listen to the older episodes of Black Box Online Radio and find out all about that. But when it was brought to my attention by Jerome from the French Wrecking Crew was that what the Zodiac did after the Stein murder was he got a bigger audience. He's committing the crimes in Vallejo, and Lake Herman Road was not even truly in Vallejo. It was on unincorporated land between Benicia and Vallejo. And the Zodiac is talking about Vallejo multiple times. He doesn't even mention Benicia, but people associate the Zodiac killer with the Bay Area. I remember the first time I ever heard about the Zodiac on America's Most Wanted with John Walls, and he said the Zodiac killer terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area. Well, one way to get a bigger audience was to commit a murder in Presidio Heights where Paul Stein was killed, and then cut off a piece of his bloody shirt, bail that in, and then all of a sudden, more eyes are on him, more people are talking about him, and as Jerome pointed out, it got Dave Toschi on the case, and he believed that that was specifically done to get Dave Toschi involved, because Dave Toschi was a high-profile detective, and you can see dramatization of him in the Zodiac Fincher film, but he was also the inspiration for not only Dirty Harry with Clint Eastwood, but before the Zodiac crimes, Bullet with Steve McQueen, so he's a high-profile detective, and getting somebody like him involved in the case would just escalate the Zodiac's persona, making him a bigger personality. But the reasons why I think that this was done to imitate Jack the Ripper, or taking inspiration from the Ripper, is after the third night of Ripper activity, a message was written on a wall called the Goulston Street Graffito, and then after the third Zodiac crime, there's a message written on the car door. After the fourth murder, the Ripper took the kidney of one of the victims, Catherine Eddowes, cut it in half, and mailed it in with the From Hell letter, again, allegedly, and then after the Stein murder, the fourth night of Zodiac activity, Paul Stein's shirt is cut off and mailed in with a letter. So there are similarities, but there are also a lot of differences with Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. But which one of these makes the most sense to you? Was this a copycat? Was this someone taking inspiration from other serial killers? Was this someone who just simply wanted a bigger audience and more publicity? Now, this is specifically about why the Zodiac chose to use a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, because, I mean, there are numerous reasons why a taxi driver could have been targeted. Some people think that the Zodiac Killer knew Paul Stein. Other people think that this was done to recreate the murder of Ray Davis from Oceanside in 1962, which was another similar taxi cab murder. I mean, there are countless reasons why people think that the Zodiac would have targeted Paul Stein, and other people think that it was done for geographic positioning, so that it could match up with certain points on a map, which the Zodiac would reveal later on, and then there's this hidden message. So we don't necessarily know exactly why the Zodiac murdered Paul Stein, but the challenge question that came from Vincent was, why feel the need to include the piece of the bloody shirt? It could be as simple as someone wanted to do something that was more gruesome and more horrific. I could be completely wrong about these Jack the Ripper connections. I really could, for the following reason. It could just be that this is how that type of criminal thinks, and I'm always trying to be aware of that. Now, I said that Vincent had a second part to his open letter to Ned DeHaan, and it says, "Attention, Ned DeHaan. I am so far loving the new series about Dan Cooper. If I may ask, I would be even more excited about the episodes if you did more in depth on each POI and the case in general. Your Zodiac Monday episodes are routinely 45 minutes to an hour, and your Friday episodes so far have been about half that. I'm not complaining at all about this, and I know that you are only getting started on DB Cooper, but we, your listeners and fan base, know with the utmost confidence that you are fully capable of handling a very deep dive on true crime mysteries with as much documentation and research as the Norjack incident has. So, DB Cooper is responsible for the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. history, and on Fridays this year, I have been doing a segment about DB Cooper. For a long time, I was doing the Anything Goes Friday segment, and I invite you guys to go through some of the episodes that have been previously recorded for that, but for now, I'm going to be concentrating on DB Cooper for the Friday shows, and somebody also made a request to hear a longer DB Cooper live stream, and I would love to do that in the future. I would love to get back to the live streams and everything coming out regularly. I'm just going to be working with some timetables and trying to get everything sorted offline and then get back to life online. And then, yes, I would love to talk more about the DB Cooper suspects in depth, because Vincent is right. There definitely is information out there, and I'm just starting to go through the DB Cooper books and just looking firstly at the free samples, what people are putting out, and a lot of people don't even want to release those. You only have to buy paperback books for $18, and I know that doesn't immediately mean that they are trying to cash in, but I get a little bit skeptical about that. I mean, I'm always just curious why there's not an electronic version, but I would like to do longer things on DB Cooper, and on Wednesdays I do a regular segment about Jack the Ripper, and that is Ripper Wednesday, and now we have Cooper Friday, and if you want to follow along with all of these true crime discussions, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and you can also go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. And I should also remind you guys that there are new episodes in the White Horse Killer saga coming out on the weekends. My first book was called Killer on a White Horse, A Story of the Evening Watchman, and that audiobook has been recorded in its entirety, and that's available here online. There's a playlist, and all of the White Horse Killer saga episodes are going into a playlist. The White Horse Killer saga was originally inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, the idea that there was this serial killer mailing in taunting messages, and this type of cult-like figurehead could have been responsible for it. And that turned into the first book, and I wrote a sequel story in the second book, Down the Dark Lane, which is also available on YouTube in audiobook format for free. And White Horse Strong is a YouTube exclusive in audiobook format that comes out on the weekends. That's the third part of the White Horse Killer saga. So lots of things to check out here on Black Box Online Radio. Once again, you can hit the like button and subscribe if you are curious about any of these true crime episodes or stories. But I said that I was going to be talking to you guys about the book, The Allen Files by John Bowman. And this is one that I absolutely had to read. As soon as somebody told me about this book, I was like, I'm heading over to Amazon.com, and I picked up a copy. I didn't even read the description, and I didn't know what I was getting into. The Allen Files by John Bowman is a set of documents that has been assembled about Arthur Lee Allen. I think that a fair way of putting this is it's his military records that have been organized. And there is a book out there called Zodiac Killer, Just the Facts by Tom Voigt, which is a typed and organized version of the Zodiac Killer police reports. And the Allen Files isn't even at that level. It is just the scanned photocopies of Arthur Lee Allen's military records, particularly when he was in the Navy. And I'm still very appreciative of it. I was really quite surprised because I was expecting that it was going to be a commentary on these files, but it's actually just the files that have been assembled into a book. And I do have a Kindle version, and I can make screenshots of it. And the person who recommended this book to me got permission from John Bowman, contacted him, and I was able to use 2 of them last week. But other than that, he has a very strict request on the front of the book. It's actually like on page 2 or 3, where he just says, please don't share anything without his permission. So I'm just going to be talking about them as opposed to showing you guys all of the things due to, respecting the request. But last week on the channel, I was talking about how Arthur Lee Allen received an honorable discharge from the Navy, and it's widely believed that he received a dishonorable discharge. But Arthur Lee Allen was much more involved in the Navy than it might seem. I mean, when you look into Arthur Lee Allen as a Zodiac killer suspect, you might hear some things about how, oh, he just was in the military and it didn't work out. But he actually, is deactivated and then reactivated in the Navy, and he goes back on active duty and so on, well into the 1950s, and all of that stuff is documented in the Allen files. But the things that I found to be most fascinating were that, firstly, I did mention this last week, but Arthur Lee Allen worked as a radio operator apprentice when he was in the Navy and earned the China Service Medal. And a lot of people think that the Zodiac might have had some type of connection to radio operations, because the Zodiac does use very technical language, and they think that this is something that could come from someone who had a high understanding of electronics. I mean, firstly, the Zodiac killer is designing bombs and making bomb diagrams and so on, and of course that's going to tie into electronics some way, somehow. But there are Zodiac killer suspects out there, such as Rick Marshall, perhaps, who was a radio operator, ham radio operator, as well as working as a projectionist in a movie theater. And a lot of people think that he would have had the technical knowledge plus the awkward and weird personality all put together to be the Zodiac. And another one is Jack Torrance. When I did the episodes on Jack Torrance last winter, one of the points that was put forward in favor of him being the Zodiac killer was, again, he had a very high understanding of electronics because he wasn't even a casual radio operator. He carried multiple permits for radio operations because it was somewhat of a passion project for him, something that he was heavily involved in. And Jack Torrance is the Zodiac killer suspect that allegedly had a Lake Berryessa-style hood hidden in a piece of what electronic equipment that was discovered by his stepson, Dennis Kaufman. But if I can be very honest with you guys, I think that was a dud that was created by Dennis Kaufman. I believe that Dennis Kaufman was a total liar, and he just fabricated the Lake Berryessa hood because he wanted either fame, money, attention, something of that sort. I think that it was a purely deceptive effort on the part of Dennis Kaufman. But with Arthur Lee Allen, not only was he a recipient of the China Service Medal, when I was reading the Allen Files by John Bowman, he was inducted into the Golden Dragons, the world-famous Golden Dragons, when he was in the Navy. And I was just reading this, and he actually has something that is signed off by the Supreme Golden Dragon. And that just stood out to me. I mean, you see that someone is the Supreme Golden Dragon of anything, it might get your attention. And here's a little bit of background info on the Golden Dragons. In the Navy, Strike Fighter Squadron 192 is also known as the world-famous Golden Dragons. They are a United States FA Navy 18E Super Hornet Fighter Squadron stationed at NAS Lemoore. And the background on the Golden Dragons is that the squadron's first insignia that was approved by the Chief of Naval Operations was in 1945, and that consisted of a kangaroo with crimson boxing gloves, and the squadron was known as the Fightin' Kangaroos. Firstly, I am so glad they changed their name to the Golden Dragons. That sounds a little bit more badass than the Fightin' Kangaroos, but I am fully aware that kangaroos can mess you up. I watch YouTube and kangaroo boxing and all that. Following the squadron's redesignation to VF-15A, the squadron changed its name to the Black Knights, and a new insignia was improved in 1947. Okay, kangaroos to Black Knights, we're doing really well here. I like that. It was a black helmet with gold markings and a gold shield. When the squadron was redesignated VF-151, the helmet shield insignia was modified and the Latin inscription was In Omnia Parotus, which means ready for anything. A new squadron insignia was improved on August 8th of 1950, consisting of a silver dragon with a gray and black aircraft carrier. The design was modified with a yellow dragon, white nuclear symbol, and a cloud, and a red rising center when the squadron became the VA-192 on June 21st of 1956, and it took on the name the Golden Dragons. And in the Allen Files by John Bowman, it states that Arthur Lee Allen was inducted into the Golden Dragons because he participated in either a mission or activities that involved him to go into a submersible at 100 feet and crossing certain points of latitude, as well as going at a certain speed underwater, and he was inducted into the Golden Dragons. Now, I've had the opportunity to interview Melissa Rose Tappa and Thornton Daniel Jeffrey of ZodiacKillerBomb.com, and Jeff Thornton asked me a question about which other Zodiac killer suspects have a connection to the Dragons in the Navy. They have a Zodiac killer suspect named L.D. Hill, who also had a connection to the Dragons in the Navy, and that was simply a challenge question that was proposed to me. Well, one of them was Arthur Lee Allen. He was inducted into the Golden Dragons when he was in the Navy, amongst doing other things. And this will become very important because the Zodiac killer will go on to mail the Dragon card. And I would actually like to go over to ZodiacKillerCiphers.com and talk about the Dragon card. And I have to give a shout out to Richard Grinnell, who does an amazing job over there assembling everything for ZodiacCiphers.com. However, with this website, he shows that the Zodiac Killer's Dragon card is heavily connected to another correspondence known as the Button Letter. In fact, it says right here, the Dragon card was the immediate correspondence before the Zodiac Killer's Button Letter, mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle on April 28th of 1970. It contained a picture of a dragon and a donkey with the reverse side requesting the wearing of Zodiac buttons, like other counterculture movements at the time. They had buttons such as Peace, Black Power, and Melville Eats Blubber. Yes, that's even something that I tripped on saying, because of course I'm thinking about Melvin Bell Lie, and this could be a direct connection to the Zodiac Killer's activities involving the lawyer Melvin Belli. First, I'm going to read the text that is here talking about the buttons. If you don't want me to have this blast, you must do two things. Tell everyone about the bus bomb with all of the details. I would like to see some nice Zodiac buttons wandering around town. Everyone already has their buttons, and it does say that already, A-L-R-E. Everyone already has their buttons, like Peace, Black Power, and Melville Eats Blubber, etc., etc. Well, it would cheer me up considerably if I saw a lot of people wearing my button. Please, no nasty ones like Melvin's. Thank you. And this is again when the Zodiac Killer starts revealing a different side of himself. At first, he's trying to be really tough. I am the murderer of the teenagers at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July. To prove that, here are some facts that only I and the police know. Then the Lake Berryessa stabbing. He's saying that he's an escaped convict trying to get to Mexico. After the Stein murder, he's mailing in the pieces of the bloody shirt. And then he does mail in a piece of the bloody shirt with the Melvin Belli letter on December 20th of 1969. But by that point, the Zodiac is either intentionally or unintentionally taking on more of a sad, lonely man persona, where he's saying, there's this thing inside me that can't stop me from killing, and now he's saying stuff like, oh, I'm getting incredibly lonely and I don't want to be ignored. And I'm going to read you a quotation from this again. Let's just go through it. Well, it would cheer me up considerably if I saw a lot of people wearing my button. Please, no nasty ones like Melvin's. This is definitely a different voice that I have found in the Zodiac letters, and I'm sure you guys would probably come to an agreement on that. And I've talked before about how there are at least 3 different voices that are used in the Zodiac letters, and this could all be accounted for just different changes in personality. And to talk more about the Dragon card, we have 2 characters that are riding a dragon and a donkey. One of them, most people think is meant to be Don Quixote, and the other one is meant to be Sancho Panza. But it says, sorry to hear your ass is a dragon. I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast. P.S. on back. And this is talking about the bus bomb that was... the Zodiac claimed that he was going to detonate. Now, the Zodiac was not only a serial killer, he was also a domestic terrorist. And for the longest time, I still just have to stand by my original observation. The Zodiac never followed through with the bus bomb threat. But so I just thought there never was a bomb. I thought it was an empty threat. He also talked about detonating other types of explosives, and I just thought those were empty threats. He also thought about targeting school children and getting the kiddies as they come bouncing out. I thought those were empty threats because he didn't follow through on them. And the Zodiac made it very clear that he was capable of killing people, or at the very least, he was able to write letters providing details that only he and the police knew, as well as mailing in pieces of Paul Stein's bloody shirt. As previously stated, he was capable of committing these crimes, but he didn't follow through on the bomb threats. That made me think that there never was a bomb. It was all a ruse and it was all made up. And it was just more or less putting people on a wild goose chase, or at the very least, getting attention for himself. The Zodiac loved attention. Look at this context again. Please wear buttons. Cheer me up. Wear buttons that have my name or logo on it, just no nasty ones. This person is all about himself. But I have a direct question for you. Do you believe that the dragon that is featured on the Zodiac Killer's dragon card is one that is a direct reference to his service in the Navy? As stated, Arthur Lee Allen was inducted into the Golden Dragons. Other Zodiac suspects like L.D. Hill were also in the Navy and members of Dragon squadrons. And do you think that that's what this is referring to, and that he is just trying to insert little details and hints and maybe even inspirations from his own life into the Zodiac Killer workings? What do you think about that? Or do you think that there is not enough information that is available in the Dragon card to demonstrate that this actually was what the Zodiac was trying to say? And right now, I would like to get to your supporter shoutouts on BuyMeACoffee.com. As previously stated, anyone who makes a donation or contribution to help support the show will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And the first one comes to us from Batman66. Thank you so much for your regular and consistent support. And Batman66 has also helped out a lot with the YouTube shorts. Now, as you guys know, I've been on the move a little bit, moving house, so to speak, so I apologize for not working more on the Black Box Online Radio shorts. I've been trying to put out one a day, and I was doing that for quite a while, actually, but this week, maybe even tomorrow, there will be a return of the BBOR shorts that are also available on Facebook as Reels and Instagram as Reels as well, and they're going to be talking about all types of different true crime cases, and I'm hoping that those will also be incorporated into more episodes of Black Box Online Radio. I talk a lot about serial killers, criminal psychology, and sometimes there's just an episode that is just too big to discuss in a YouTube short, and it ends up being incorporated into a larger segment of Black Box Online Radio, so please look out for those, and you can hit the like button and subscribe if you are curious about different true crime cases and you want to see some episodes on them. And the next one comes to us from River Prawn Pottery. Thank you so much for your regular and consistent support as well. I really do appreciate that, and a lot of the things that are going to be donated to the channel are just going to be going to true crime books that I can talk to you guys about, and I've been making a list of Zodiac Killer books to go through with you guys on Zodiac Monday, but as Vincent said, also talking about D.B. Cooper now, Jack the Ripper, and I'm not even going to lie to you, that's going to be the overwhelming majority of anything donated to the show will be spent on true crime reading materials. So thanks to Batman66 and River Prawn Pottery, and giving another shout out to Dennis G once again. Dennis has been helping find a lot of the images for Black Box Online Radio. And next I would like to give a shout out to David Cawley, who asked a question and says, Ned, have you heard of the 3X murderer from the 1930s? I just watched a video on that case, and there's a ton of parallels with the Zodiac Killer. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Zodiac read about the 3X and was influenced. And the honest answer was no, I had not heard of the 3X Killer, but I did find a fascinating website about the murders called SerialDispatches.com, which talks about lots of different serial killers as well as true crime cases such as this one, because the 3X Killer only murdered 2 people, so I don't think this would meet the definition of a serial killer, but it is another example of a murderer who committed the crimes and then would write letters that are very similar to the Zodiac's, for example. And I would actually just like to go over to SerialDispatches.com and look at everything from the beginning. The 3X Killer was a self-named double murderer whose cryptic and threatening messages sent panic into the streets of New York in 1930. He claimed to be a Russian spy and was never tracked down nor apprehended. Chain murders. Serial killers have been around for hundreds of years. Each era had their own way to describe sequential and related murders in 1930s and 40s USA. They were called chain murders because they were linked together. And I've never heard that expression before, but I completely follow it. The first victim of the 3X Killer was an individual named Joseph Mazinski. The bullet-ridden body of Joseph John Mazinski was found by passing motorists on June 13th of 1930. Police also found a woman's blood-stained coat on the passenger side of his car. Police tracked down and questioned Catherine May, age 19. Catherine May was with Mazinski the night he was killed. For 2 years, May had been having an affair with the married father of 2 and told police that Mazinski was on a secret love tryst that night. May told police that the gunman did not say a word before shooting Mazinski and rifling his pockets. The killer then forced May at gunpoint to get on a streetcar and leave the area. Before she left, he gave her a note with Mazinski's name on it in red ink and a circled 3X. Police say that they did not believe May. Oh, police say that they did not believe May, yes. It is noted that Mazinski is also spelled in a different way, and Mazinski used at least two different pronunciations and spellings of his name. The story changes on June 14th of 1930. The survivor, Catherine May, told police that she did not recognize the killer. However, under intense interrogation, she gave police the name Stephen Lombardo. The 19-year-old then repudiated the story and said that the murderer was a man that she had met a number of times, but did not know his name. She later told the police that, "I was tired of being questioned, so I made up the Lombardo story. I never knew anybody by that name. It eventually came out that a man in a black suit, bow tie, and fedora had demanded Mazinski's license before shooting him." Police received a tip that Joseph Moisset, who lived in the same area as the incident, was the killer. He was arrested by the police while on a California-bound train. He was going to attend his mother's funeral. Moisset was then released by the police. People also theorized that Joseph Mazinski was murdered as part of a bootlegging war. Okay, we're dealing with the 1930s now, so it's possible. Now, that's the first crime that took place, and there's a witness, as you heard, Catherine May. The police don't believe her story. She also tells some stories that are not true. Does she know everything that happened? Is she just covering for someone? You definitely do get some red flags about that, but she also did provide the explanation of she just simply did not want to be interrogated anymore. And sometimes under pressure, people say things that are not true. The next victim of the 3X killer was Noel Sally. The killer of Mazinski sent a letter to the New York newspaper boasting about the murder and claimed that he would kill again. He signed the letters with an underlined V and the symbol 3X. Maybe we should really call this person the V3X killer. 12 hours later, on June 17th of 1930, Noel Sally was shot dead behind the wheel of a Plymouth Roadster. Sally had been on a date with Betty Ring, the daughter of a police officer. She witnessed the murder, and later police gave the police a graphic description. Ring described a deaconish-looking man who took Sally's license and shot him in the head. Okay, so in both murders, we have this detail of the person is holding someone up at gunpoint, demanding their license, shooting them in the head. But I don't really think this is the best description. A deaconish-looking man? I hope that meant something in the 1930s, because right now I think that is just so vague. It's almost just like saying that there was a figure that was there. On the license was Sally's name in red ink and a circle 3X. Oh, and this is I jumped ahead a little bit, so I have to go back to this one because this is important. The killer then gave Ring a piece of paper, and on that paper was Sally's name in red ink with a 3X. And the 3X was circled. He led Ring to a bus so she could go home. Her husband would later use this affair to successfully petition for a divorce. Sally had been shot in the head and discovered the next morning by a farmhand. The radio salesman was 25 years old. The killer had clipped a newspaper article about Mazinski's slaying and laid it out on the victim's lap. In his letter to the newspaper, the 3X killer said that there would be 14 more people to die. And more or less, I'm going to try to read the handwriting of the 3X killer. City editors, kindly print this message in your paper for Mazinski's friends. And then there is some type of coded message. CCNYADCMY16A 3ERPA 214PM6E. Now, I know what they were talking about when they're saying that there are similarities between the Zodiac killer and the 3X killer. Cryptic messages, letters, and also leaving signatures behind, because the 3X killer is really trying to make it very clear that he murdered these two men, and these crimes are also completely done in the same way, if these details are correct. I know that sometimes we have stories in the true crime world where it sounds like all of the details are matching up, and then you go back and you find out that certain things have been imagined and invented by the press, and there is the term fantasy-filled journalism out there where it shows that some people are polluting the waters of thought with their own misinformation. But if these details are indeed correct, absolutely I would think that this is the same killer, and I would think that there is a real 3X killer. A man and a woman are approached, and the man is murdered, held up at gunpoint, forced to show his driver's license, he is killed, and then the 3X killer gives a message with a circled 3X to the female victim, escorts her to a bus or trolley or streetcar or something, and then he just disappears. Then he goes on to write this message where not only is he taking credit for the murder, but he's also trying to communicate something in a very cryptic way. Now, what's a possible difference between the Zodiac killer and the 3X killer is that, let's look here at what it says. Kindly print this message in your papers for Mazinski's friends. And that goes to show that he is sending a direct message to the victim's friends, not to the press, not to the police. He's not just making some open threat to anybody. He does want to communicate a specific message to the friends of Joseph Mazinski, the man he murdered. So does this have something to do with the bootlegging war? I mean, that's possible. I would think that that's a strong possibility. And that doesn't completely explain, though, why there's a man and a woman together and the man is shot and then the letter is handed to the female survivor. That also suggests that this is done for something that is a little bit more similar to the Zodiac, where there is somebody who is just trying to get revenge on society. And another similarity between the 3X killer and the Zodiac killer is that there is this threat to go on the kill rampage. The Zodiac said very clearly that he was going to go on a kill rampage if something was not printed in the papers. Well, the 3X killer is just saying that he's going to kill 14 people. The Zodiac saying that he's going to commit more and more crimes. He's not even going to announce the crimes in the same way. But a big difference is that the Zodiac killer made up this sort of bogus reason about how he wanted to kill people so that when he died, he would be reborn in paradise, and those whom he had killed would be his slaves. He wrote this multiple times. Slaves' paradise. He talks about it frequently. With the 3X killer, we don't necessarily know why the victims were targeted. This could have all been done for money, some type of connections. This could also have been done because there was some type of discretion going on, and I'm not going to lie. This idea just came to mind once. It just kind of hit me out of the blue, and just thinking that, what if this was someone who was almost like a private investigator that was stalking people who were having affairs and so on? And I would really think that an ordered hit wouldn't be placed on someone who's simply having an affair. I mean, you heard what the husband did when he found out that his wife was having this affair. He petitioned for a divorce. There are other ways to go about it, and that seems extremely intense, but this could also be someone who is a rejected member of society that is very upset about that, and those things happen a lot more frequently. Someone who is a type of involuntary celibate, if you will. But we're going to continue on with the story of the 3X killer in 1930. On October 17th of 1930, newspapers reported that the 3X killer, as he called himself, had sent a letter to the police saying, "I'm back and I will pay every cop a visit." More than 200 detectives were brought into a manhunt for the killer. Over the next number of months, police and newspapers would receive more letters threatening murderers. Almost 1,000 extra police officers were detailed. At one point, an officer was cleaning his gun in the Queen Station house, and the next day he received a letter signed by the 3X killer saying, "I saw you cleaning your gun last night, and I hope you didn't expect to shoot me. You will never find me." The Zodiac is also saying very similar things about how you will not slow me down, or you will not stop me because I have been too cleverer, even though the Zodiac could not spell. For the next year, hundreds of letters would be received, but almost every single one was deemed a hoax. Now, something like that, the police officer's cleaning his gun, and then the 3X killer writes a letter saying, "I saw you cleaning your gun," I would expect that that's a hoax and that's just somebody messing around, because what it doesn't have from these authentic 3X letters is a real murder, a victim's name. That seems like somebody who is just playing a prank on the police officer. But as far as the 3X killer goes, the last letter that has officially been ascribed to the 3X killer was received on October 22nd of 1931. In it, the killer threatened to kill 3 men at once. He said that he might use poison darts and a blowgun, or some mysterious, very old Hindu tricks. After this note, he was not heard from again. Again, a very small reign of activity, very small period of activity. This is somebody who got people's attention in 1930, and then kept writing the letters until 1931. Then you have the Zodiac killer getting people's attention in 1969 and continuing to write the letters well into 1970, 1971, the halt in Zodiac activity. No letters in 72 and 73 that have been authenticated, and then in 1974 having a resurfacing. Was the Zodiac killer using the 3X killer as a playbook? Not enough information. But what I want to point out is some of the things that we hear about with other serial killers who write in letters, or other murderers who write in letters, like the 3X killer, is that they often send these to the editors. And this is something that the Black Dahlia Avenger did as well. The letters that were mailed after the death of Elizabeth Short are also sent to the editor. So I think that this just goes to show that perhaps there are not these types of interconnections among different true crime cases. This is just how people are thinking. These are set elements of criminal psychology. But I do think this is a fascinating story, and I'm definitely going to look more into the case of the 3X killer. And the next thing that I have for you guys here on the Zodiac Killer News Report is going to be talking about the Zodiac Killer suspect, Joseph Paul Franklin, and he is the suspect of Sam Fisher. And Sam Fisher has sent something into the email address, BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. Anybody can use that for the show, and he says, "Hi, Ned. I just wanted to let you know I found some intriguing things in regards to the idea that the Zodiac Killer used numbers in his thinking and in his crimes. I was experimenting with numerical values of the names Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs, and I found interestingly that if you take the first two words of each, Lake Herman and Blue Rock, and convert the letters to numbers, they equal 88. I will also attach a screenshot of an idea that I had on the pivot patterns of the Z340 and the backwards L's or J's. I found that each has a dot that converts to a V and is at the end of the pivot pattern, making a J. So, firstly about this, Sam Fisher is a believer that the Zodiac Killer had a type of mental disorder called arithmomania. It's more or less a form of obsessive-compulsive disorder related to numbers. He believes that the Zodiac Killer had a fascination with the number 88. This is used in some other types of belief systems, but 88 here can be found by taking the numerical value of the letters in Lake Herman and Blue Rock, and then that converts to 88. Now with Lake Herman, sure, the Zodiac committed the murder at Lake Herman Road, and he also talked about how he talked about Lake Herman Road as Lake Herman, saying, I'm the murderer of the two teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl on the 4th of July. Now, Blue Rock, I think, is a little bit more of a stretch because this Zodiac crime is referred to as the Blue Rock Springs shooting, and Lake Herman is more or less associated with the exact location. It's the name of the lake. The name of the lake is not Lake Herman Road, it's Lake Herman. The name of the springs are not Blue Rock, they are Blue Rock Springs. So I think that that is a bit of a stretch, but the 88 and Lake Herman, that is something that does stand out a little bit more. And I will include Sam's pattern that he has found about the J's in the 340. That's another hidden clue. But I actually have something a little bit more fascinating about the Zodiac Killer suspect, Joseph Paul Franklin. And I would like to give a shout out to Ed, who has written into the channel, and he responded to the video that I did on Joseph Paul Franklin as a Zodiac Killer suspect. And Ed has written out a personal connection that he has to the story. I got called to a meeting back in 1997 and asked what suggestions I had if we were going to house a very dangerous inmate. I suggested if he was that dangerous, maybe we needed to see through a shower curtain. The chief of corrections liked the idea and told someone to get it along with some other items. A couple of mornings later, I reported to work at the Hamilton County Jail, and I was told that I would be watching Joseph Paul Franklin. Joe talked about handling some racist rag in his youth called the Thunderbolt. I misread that. Joe talked about handing out some racist rag in his youth called the Thunderbolt. He also talked about the shootings that he had previously done or been convicted of, such as Larry Flint and Jordan. He referred to himself as 33, which made me think that he killed 33 people, but I never asked him about it. And again, Sam Fisher, Zodiac suspect, had arithmomania, a form of OCD in relation to numbers, so if he's just calling himself 33, that doesn't surprise me at all. And Joseph Paul Franklin, of course, also has a connection to 88. 88 is almost like a mirrored copy of 33. I actually pissed him off one day by asking him something. In Chattanooga, we had a saying in the county jail. If someone thought you were trying to avoid the penitentiary, they would say you were dick-dodging it. I personally saw through Joseph Paul Franklin's BS and felt that he was dick-dodging the electric chair. I said, Joe, you're not in here because of any evidence they have on you, right? You're just here because of the information that you provided, right? I asked, why the hell was he there if he had gotten away with it? And damn did it piss him off. He told me that I couldn't see the bigger picture, and that he needed to do the right thing. The fact was that Joe was sentenced to die and was trying to provide evidence in a number of killings he committed so that he could go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, fessing up to crimes, and try to extend his execution date. At some point, the authorities caught up with his BS. And Joseph Paul Franklin is not the only serial killer to do that. Lots of serial killers do that. But what I was discussing in the episode where Sam Fisher actually was a guest, it's called Zodiac Killer Suspect Joseph Paul Franklin. It's a two-part interview with Sam Fisher. And I was talking about how when I would watch Joseph Paul Franklin in an interview, he would more or less talk about how he's a born-again Christian, he's been changed and rehabilitated. And I was like, is this guy really telling the truth, or is he just messing with people because he showed absolutely no remorse for the murders that he committed, and he seemed very fake and insincere? And you heard Ed's take on the subject, somebody who knew him personally. But what Ed is talking about when he says that Joseph Paul Franklin was not there because he was truly caught and just caught red-handed or anything, he was there because of information that he provided to them. A clear example of this is the story of Larry Flint, where Joseph Paul Franklin confessed to attempting the murder of Larry Flint, shooting him and ultimately paralyzing him. But the only reason why he was ever identified as the killer was because of information he provided to the authorities himself. And I discussed that with Sam Fisher, and I was like, do you think he actually did it? And Sam said yes, because he provided information that only the real killer would know. So that's something that it seems rather open and shut that Joseph Paul Franklin was that shooter. And you can read more about him as a Zodiac killer suspect in Sam Fisher's book, The Zodiac Killer Identity. And the final thing that I have for you guys is actually a response to one of the shorts that I had put out on this channel. And I confess this one is going in a different direction from the Zodiac Killer, but because I put out a lot of true crime shorts here on BlackBoxOnlineRadio, I talk about a lot of different serial killer stories. And I would like to give a shout out to Andrew WVA. This one is talking about the serial killer Eugene Blake. It's called My Recollections. Hello, Ned. I saw that you recently did a short episode on Eugene Blake, a notorious West Virginia serial killer currently in prison. I have to say that Mr. Blake possessed an uncanny ability to charm and manipulate others. When I was in college in the early 1990s, Mr. Blake was the cafeteria manager at my school, and I would often see him walking around whenever I was hanging out in the student union. My mother also worked at the college and would often enjoy chatting with him over coffee. He was regarded as a model employee and was entrusted with taking lunch up to the college president in his office. I do have to wonder, though, how the college decided to hire him in the first place. If they knew that he had served time for murder, he was released from prison in 1979. One of the most bizarre stories about Eugene Blake concerned his activities in the 1970s, while he was imprisoned at the Moundsville Penitentiary, just a short drive from Wheeling, West Virginia. Mr. Blake was very fond of acting, and the prison staff allowed him to regularly travel to Wheeling to appear in plays and musicals, so he was able to manipulate the authorities as well. I also wanted to highlight the late Fred Connors, who founded the Ohio Valley Cold Case Squad, and wrote a series of Pulitzer Prize-nominated articles on Eugene Blake. Fred passed away in the summer of 2023, but I was fortunate to meet him at an event in 2018 where we discussed true crime and my interest in the Zodiac case. Fred really got to the heart of not just who Eugene Blake was, but how in the 1970s he was really conning a lot of prominent Wheeling people, said John McCabe, the editor of the Intelligencer and the Wheeling News Register. Fred Connors' reporting connected the threads and showed Blake to be a serial killer. Turned out, as we all learned, Eugene Blake was a serial killer who committed at least 2 murders that we know of in the Wheeling area and another elsewhere in West Virginia, and Fred was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize for that story. And back when I did the short episode on Eugene Blake, he was a convicted murderer who goes to prison. Then he's a model inmate in prison, and then he is released, and he doesn't stay to his good behavior. He returns back to his destructive tendencies and goes on to commit additional homicides, as previously stated. So he was someone who was extremely manipulative and deceptive, and that is totally normal with serial killers. It's totally normal to see this type of behavior, putting on the glib, superficial charm and facade, deceiving people in different ways. I mean, there are countless examples of this, and I'm sure you can think of some that come to mind, convicted serial killers. But firstly, I'm sure the Zodiac Killer, whoever he was out there, would have been exactly like this, living in a way where he's just completely non-threatening and people think that he is a good person when in reality he's a serial killer. But there are countless examples. What about Jack Unterweger, the poet of death, someone who goes on Austrian television talking about how he's this type of reformed prisoner and an intellectual, then he came to America and started committing murders. And I'm sure you can think of some other examples as well. But that will be all for me now on this Zodiac Monday. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, as well as hearing the stories about Eugene Blake and the 3X Killer and Joseph Paul Franklin. Thank you so much for listening to the other segments, too, about D.B. Cooper and Jack the Ripper. And I will see you guys over on Ripper Wednesday talking about the Ripper case as well. That will be all for me now, so anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram. That's all, and goodbye.